Oh my goodness, dude. That is such a fire intro. And you might be like, what are you talking about? I know the intro's new. Let me tell you what. I told Steven last week that he should create an intro video for this show, Hoops and Homers. We're about a month and a half old now. And I was like, hey, look, man, we just eclipsed 100 views on one of the most recent episodes. Be a cool little gift. And he says he's been working on it, quote unquote. This morning, I hop on to set everything up for the stream today. Okay. And lo and behold, there's an intro video in there. Now, he hadn't told me he had finished it up. Just as soon as yesterday, he had told me he was working on it. And I was like, well, all right, dope. Maybe in the new year. I log in. I'm in the studio. I see this fire intro video. And I play it during my test recording. And I'm like, this is insanely dope. I can't believe he didn't tell me. I guess it was a cool surprise for us to kick off our Saturday morning episode of Hoops and Homers, the last show of the year. By the way, it's been a good run so far at the end of 2025, but we'll be taking the next week or two off here. Next week's obviously Christmas. Then we'll take New Year's week off. Maybe not, actually. We'll be back the first Saturday in the new year. But ultimately, I had to give Steven a shout out because that intro video is way too fire, dude. And I was not expecting that. He should have told me sooner. Ultimately, welcome to Hoops and Homers. Hoops, Homers. We got everything here for you. Nuggets and Rockies related. By the way, maybe as a fun little way to end the year, I have these two baseballs. Sometimes I fiddle with them on these episodes, on these shows, but I figure I might as well tell you guys the backstory of these two. These are both actual game balls that I got going to a professional sporting event. This is the first one. I think we'll talk about this one first. This is the coolest of the two, I think. This, I don't know if you can see this. I got this at the Futures game when the Futures game was here and the All-Star weekend was here in Colorado. What was that, 2021? Funny story. Wasn't actually in the game, but it was in batting practice. So me and my buddy went out to the outfield while the guys were on the field taking BP when that was still a thing that was commonly done. I've been to a few games over the last few years. Don't know why they don't do that very much anymore, at least here in Denver. Maybe I just show up too late. We went out for batting practice in the outfield, and we were kind of sitting up in left field closer to the walkway back behind, the concourse. And there's a brick wall back there. We'd watched several dozen balls be crushed at this point in batting practice, but there was this one that flew all the way, didn't quite go to the concourse, but hit off the brick wall that was just a few rows behind us. That's where we were. We were a few rows in front of that brick wall. It bounces back. This guy, I thought, was going to catch it. He had a straight shot at it, and he completely whiffed it. And it was a nice little bounce right off of, I think, one of the seats. And it just came right to me, and I caught it. So that's about the easiest opportunity I think I've ever had to get a ball in game like that. There was another time that I was watching a game in 2019, I think it was. I had a pizza in my lap, though. We were sitting third base side. Ball was hit by lefty, foul territory. It was way up there. It looked like it was coming right at us, and it kind of was. I am all prepared now, but I have the pizza on my lap, so I can't stand up. So I'm sitting. This guy literally in the seat in front of me snags it before I can just reach my hand out and catch it while I was seated. So almost had one actually in game there. This is a BP ball, anywho, from the Futures game. And then this one is a ball I got at a AAA game for the Sky Sox, back when they were the Sky Sox down in Colorado Springs. They were not the Rockies AAA affiliate at that time. I think they were the Brewers AAA affiliate. They'd made that switch. And this one was fouled way off down the left field line, out of play, into this sort of foul area where there was no seating, no bleachers or anything like that. And I reach over. I don't reach over, sorry. We were sitting third base side. I reach out to one of the security guys. I walk up down the concourse. I say, hey, can you go get me that baseball, please? I must have been like 15 years old. Maybe my dad asked. I don't even remember fully. All I remember is that I asked a security guard. That person went over, they grabbed the ball for me, gave it to me, and I was like, dope, that's a nice little souvenir. So that is the story of my two baseballs. Figured you might find that interesting. But yeah, man, it's been quite the week. For our Colorado sports teams, huh? At least the Denver Nuggets, right? The Nuggets are still in full swing. Rockies are yet to get there this offseason. They'll probably start making some moves in the next few weeks, one would assume, now that they have their front office together and most of their coaching staff together at this point in the offseason. But we're going to start with our beloved Denver Nuggets. Ladies and gentlemen, the Denver Nuggets continue rolling in the Western Conference, despite all the injuries that they've had. Okay, Peyton Watson went down this week. He's day-to-day. It's not a long-term injury, presumably, but still, now you're down Aaron Gordon, you're down a Christian Brown, you're down a Peyton Watson. Those are three of your top five defenders on this team. Okay, and despite that, they have a 6-game winning streak. They continue on rolling, man. And so we're going to talk about my prior week predictions really quickly because my first 2 weeks of making predictions have not gone very well. Okay. I think I've made 4 predictions each of the last 2 weeks. So 8 total predictions. And a grand total of 1 of them has been correct. That changes this week, by the way. Yeah, we'll just start with the Houston game. I predicted that the Nuggets would lose to Houston by at least 10. And that seemed pretty reasonable to me because I was like, well, it was a competitive game in Houston the last time these two played. The Nuggets have not been good at home recently for whatever reason. I know that on this show, I've blamed the altitude for that, kind of, considering they have a 10-game win streak on the road. All right. Anywho, I predicted that was going to be a high leverage Monday night game, but the Nuggets ultimately, kind of like they did against the Mavericks a few weeks ago at home, would not be able to hold on. Maybe they keep it competitive for the first few quarters, but they'd ultimately lose by 10 plus. Well, the Nuggets won. The Nuggets beat the Houston Rockets. Ladies and gentlemen, can you believe this? 128 to 125 in overtime. And let me tell you what, that game was absolute cinema. Absolutely cinematic. You got exactly what you wanted out of 2 of the top teams in the Western Conference Monday evening in Denver. Okay. Coming into this game, Houston was 5th in the West, actually. They'd been as high as 2 or 3 a few weeks ago, but for whatever reason, they've slipped down to 5. They're a top 3 offensive team in the league, top 5 defensive team in the league. So for that reason, I was also a little bit concerned because the Nuggets are kind of missing some of their key defenders. I was thinking to myself, well, this is not probably going to be too good of an evening for them this time around, especially if you're a little bit more banged up than you were last time. I think Aaron Gordon actually got hurt in the last Houston Rockets game that they played in Houston. Anywho, Houston shoots the fewest number of threes in the league, actually, but they're top 3 in 3-point percentage. So they can knock them down when they take them. They just don't like to take them very often. They're middle of the pack in free throw percentage, and they're bottom 10 in the league in turnovers. Had I known this going into last week, maybe my prediction would have changed, but I don't think it would have changed substantially. Okay, I mean, they turned the ball over at one of the highest rates in the league. I think over their last 5 games, they've turned the ball over 20 times per game. So that's kind of insane. Had I known that, might have been a different prediction that I would have made here. But ultimately, it was a pretty close game in the first quarter. Okay, Houston won the first quarter. They held a 5 to 9 point lead through most of the quarter. They shot 8% better from the field than Denver did, so it was pretty marginal difference there. Denver made 1 more 3 than Houston did on 4 more attempts. Okay, so they're a little bit inefficient from 3 in that first quarter. Houston had 6 more rebounds, 1 more assist. And so it seems like Houston was just giving themselves better opportunities in that first quarter, and the Nuggets really weren't able to get out of the gates the way they probably would have liked to. Although that's kind of... No, that's actually not really been their theme this year. Their theme this year has generally been the starters come out strong. They build a 5-7 point lead throughout most of the first quarter. Then in the last few minutes of the first quarter, the first bench unit starts to make its way in. And for whatever reason, they just give the lead right on up. That's not really what happened on Monday. Houston kind of just slowly got themselves a 5 to 9 point lead in the first quarter. Okay. Second quarter was a completely different story. All right, the Nuggets absolutely crushed second quarter, won the second quarter by like 19 points. They turned a 6-point deficit into a 7-point lead. Okay, so they came out absolutely balling in the second quarter, shot 15% better than Houston from the field. Houston made one more three on one fewer attempt in that quarter than the Nuggets did. The Nuggets had more rebounds, Nuggets had more assists, and they were just setting themselves up for better opportunities in that quarter for sure. That quarter was an absolute winner for the Denver Nuggets, and they went into the half up by 7 as a result of that effort and that performance. Houston, however, came out in the second half and they won the third quarter. Okay, they had a 4-point lead at one point, so they shaved that Nuggets 7-point lead completely all the way down. But that 4-point lead didn't really last. Nuggets ended up winning the third quarter from a points perspective. They went into the fourth quarter with a 3-point lead. Okay, Houston shot 18% better from the field in the third quarter than Denver did. Denver made 2 more threes on 4 more attempts. And the rebounds and the assists were pretty close, although Houston had more of both in the third quarter. So you can kind of see how they were able to trim that lead down throughout the course of the third quarter. And you get into the fourth quarter. Okay, this is where the cinema absolutely begins, right? Houston won the fourth quarter. Denver was up by 5 points max in the fourth quarter, and they went into the fourth quarter up 3. So that shows you just how close the fourth quarter was. I think Houston actually only won by about 3 points in that quarter. Well, obviously, because it went to overtime and there was a 3-point deficit. So that's what happened. But here's the story of the fourth quarter. Okay, Houston made 3 more field goals on 4 more shot attempts. Okay, both teams made 5 threes. I think the Nuggets took 1 more attempt. Houston had 5 more rebounds. They had 3 more assists. Denver made 3 more free throws on 6 more free throw attempts. Denver was 2 of 3 from the free throw line in the last 2 minutes of the quarter, and that was huge. One of those free throws came to tie the game, actually. So if you'll remember, Şengün came down, made an absolute clutch shot for Houston. Houston goes up by 1. And now we're thinking to ourselves, oh my goodness, we're going to have to figure out a way to get an inbound play that works. And then it's probably going to have to be Joker or Jamal taking an incredibly tough shot to end this game. Didn't want to put yourself in that position, but Tim Hardaway got fouled on that last offensive possession that we had, or at least one of the last possessions we had that game. He ended up getting the free throw. I think Jamal actually took the free throw, and we went to overtime. But had that not happened, it would have been a very close loss for the Denver Nuggets in regulation. Thankfully, that didn't happen, though, because in overtime, the Nuggets came out and they closed the deal. Okay, they had a 7-point lead at one point in overtime. Both teams made 3 field goals in overtime. Houston took 4 more shot attempts, though. So they just weren't knocking their shots down. They had plenty of opportunities to close the Nuggets out in overtime. Wasn't happening. Denver made 1 more 3 on 1 more attempt. Okay. And they had 2 more rebounds. Houston had 1 more assist than Denver did. But again, the free throws came through critically here because the Nuggets made 2 more free throws on only 1 more attempt. But here's the thing. None of Denver's 4 free throws in overtime were legit. That's coming from a Nuggets fan. And the reason why this is because the NBA did a last 2 minutes report. They do this thing at the end of every game. They evaluate the refereeing in the last 2 minutes where things get tight, things get close. And in looking at the last 2 minutes of this game, the last 2 minutes of overtime, the NBA established that there were 3 incorrect calls that the refs made, all of which favored us. 2 of those calls were called fouls on Houston that resulted in us getting those 4 free throws. One of them was a missed call that should have been called on Hardaway, fouling Şengün in an off-ball way, which could have resulted in free throws, I believe. Don't quite remember what the bonus situation might have been at that point. Ultimately speaking, none of those points that the Nuggets got in the last 2 minutes of that game with those free throws, the 4 free throws. Remember, Denver won by 3. None of those 4 free throws were legit. And it's for this reason why this prediction that I made last week was wrong ultimately, but it was a lot closer to being right than I thought. At the end of the day, Nuggets should have lost the game against Houston on Monday. Okay? They obviously played today. We'll get to that in a second. But on Monday evening, Houston was the better team all in all. Now, doesn't change the fact that they missed the attempts that they had, more attempts that they had in overtime than Denver did. But it doesn't mean that without those 4 free throws, different game, Okay. So that's kind of just the takeaway from this game. It was a very cinematic game. It was close. You were watching it on the edge of your seat if you're a Nuggets fan the whole evening, especially in the fourth quarter and overtime. But it was very questionable. It tends to happen. Okay. These things happen. No one's perfect. Not even the refs. But at the end of the day, Nuggets pulled out the win. So here were the final team stat lines. Nuggets shot 51% from the field, 44% from three, 82% from the free throw line. They made 15 threes, only turned the ball over 10 times. Okay. Houston had 51% from the field, 48% from three, although they took substantially fewer. 73% from the free throw line. So they weren't making their free throws. Made 12 threes, turned the ball over 16 times. Okay, it's hard to win a game when you're turning the ball over 6 times more than your opponent, regardless of last 2-minute fouls. Okay, Joker came through, got his triple-double, 39, 15, and 10 on 13 of 27 shooting, 5 of 9 from three. Joker's relationship with the three-point line is a very interesting one because it's like some nights he'll take 2 threes, maybe make 1, and then other nights he'll take 10 and to make like 6. So at the end of the day, he's a fantastic three-point shooter, especially for a big, especially for a center. But it's just weird to see how often his three-point shooting varies per night based on the team that they're playing. Anywho, massive triple-doubler from Joker in that game. Jamal, 35, 3 and 5, 9 of 17 from the field, 3 of 5 from three. Jamal continues to play like an all-star. Okay. Bottom line is, if he does not make the all-star game this year for Team World, there will be a problem. Because at a minimum, if he's not going to be an all-star, he's on pace for most improved player this year. I mean, dude is averaging like 25 points a game. He's still shooting close to 50% from the field, and he's still shooting well over 40% from three, all of which are career highs. He's averaging career highs in everything, I think. Make that man an all-star. That's the caliber of play he's contributed to this team so far, a team that's second in the Western Conference. Okay, Spencer Jones, by the way, 11 points against Houston on Monday evening. I think Cam Johnson had 13, but I wanted to highlight Spencer because Spencer had 11 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 blocks. Okay, dude was getting it done, getting the dirty work done when the Nuggets needed it to happen. Okay, he was putting that defensive pressure on all night. That's what he does. Okay, but also 2 huge threes. Okay, 1 late in the fourth quarter, 1 late in overtime. That's just clutch. And he's going to get those looks, right? Because if it's a close game down the stretch and the Nuggets have Joker and they have Jamal and both of them have already dropped 30 points in a game, you're not going to let those guys beat you, okay? You want to force a driving kick to a guy like Spencer Jones. But if Spencer Jones is going to knock those shots down, you really don't have any chance if you're an opponent that the Denver Nuggets are playing on any given evening. So kudos to Spencer for coming through in the clutch, offensively and defensively. Şengün had a triple-double for Houston, 33, 10, and 10. Durant had 25, 5, and 7. And both Jabari Smith and Josh Okogie had 16 points. So that was the Houston game Monday evening. Obviously, my prediction was not correct. Houston did not beat Denver by 10 points. But my Jokic prediction was correct. I did say he would have a triple-double in both games. Monday evening, he did have a triple-double. And so I was very pleased to see that. Now we're going to talk about the Magic game, because this is the game that I thought would be a closer win for the Nuggets. I thought the Nuggets would beat Orlando by about 5 to 10 points. Okay. And I had good reason to think so. But remember, I was making this prediction based on the fact that they would lose to Houston and be a little bit upset about that, and then go into Thursday night's matchup with a chip on their shoulder. Ultimately, Nuggets didn't really need that chip. Okay. They just flat out outplayed the Magic in this game. Simple enough. Coming into this game, Orlando is 6th in the East. They're a top 10 offensive team. They're a top 10 defensive team. So they're pretty complete. And that makes sense because they've been pretty competitive the last few seasons. And they have a solid young core centering around Banchero, now Desmond Bane, Anthony Black, Wendell Carter, I suppose, is still there. They have a solid group of young guys who can play both sides of the ball. So this is a competitive team. This was not going to be a cakewalk for the Nuggets. It ended up being that way somehow, some way, but top 10 offensive team, top 10 defensive team. They're bottom 10 in the league in 3-pointers attempted and 3-point percentage. They're middle of the pack in free throw percentage, and they're top 10 in the league in turnovers. So they don't turn the ball over very much. And so this was going to be a very intriguing game. Orlando won the first quarter. Okay, they held a 5 to 10 point lead throughout most of that first quarter. So nothing out of reach. It's not like the Nuggets started off the game completely flat. Both teams in the first quarter actually were 12 of 23 from the field. The only difference is that Orlando made 4 more threes than the Nuggets did on only 2 more attempts. Orlando had 9 more rebounds than the Nuggets. They had 8 more assists. And so Orlando was really playing better team basketball in the first quarter than the Denver Nuggets were. And they were knocking down their shots, not necessarily more, but they were making more threes. Okay, so this deficit was pretty easy to explain. But similar to the Houston game on Monday evening, Nuggets came out second quarter, absolutely rocked. Okay, won the second quarter. They turned a 14-point deficit that they were once in. Magic had a 14-point lead early in the second. They turned that 14-point deficit into a 14-point lead at one point in time in that second quarter. They shot 38% better from the field than the Magic did in the second quarter. Okay, they made 4 more threes than the Magic did on only 1 more attempt, had 6 more rebounds, had 5 more assists. So Nuggets absolutely dominated the Magic in the second quarter. And that's why they went into the half with the lead. Both teams actually tied the third quarter of this game. Denver led by 21 points at one point in the third quarter. So they continued building that lead that they had amassed in the second quarter. Shot 12% better from the field than Orlando did in the third. Made 2 more threes on 4 fewer attempts. So Orlando started to stop making their shots as the game went on. Orlando had only 1 more rebound, 2 more assists. So it was pretty... the difference there is not substantial. So ultimately, it makes sense that the Nuggets were able to hold on to their pretty big lead. And then in the fourth quarter, Orlando actually won the fourth quarter. They cut the deficit at one point late in the game to about 8 points. And at that point, I was kind of thinking to myself, oh no, could we really see another one of these games where the Nuggets end up blowing a massive lead? It's happened a few times this year, especially at home. Didn't happen. Thankfully, they were able to hold on. So Orlando did shoot 21% better from the field in the fourth quarter, but Denver made 3 more threes on 8 more attempts. So Nuggets weren't really incredibly efficient in the fourth quarter against Orlando. Both teams had 10 rebounds, and Orlando only had 2 more assists. So it got a little bit concerning there for a while in the fourth quarter, but ultimately, if you build a 20-plus point lead against a team, you're in pretty solid position to say that you dominated that game, okay? Especially if you hold on to win by double digits, which the Nuggets did, 126 to 115. All right, final team stats from that game. Denver shot 56% from the field, 44% from 3, 80% from the free throw line, made 16 threes, turned the ball over 13 times. Orlando shot 47% from the field, 33% from 3. Not good at all. But they made their free throws. Well, they didn't make their free throws. That's a 69, not an 89. 69% from the free throw line. Only made 11 threes. Turned the ball over 9 times, though. So they kept themselves in it by not giving the ball away haphazardly. Okay, Jamal, another all-star performance, man. 32 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 11 of 22 from the field, 7 of 12 from 3. Okay, he continues doing this night in and night out. Okay, same thing with Joker. Another triple-double, 23, 11, and 13. 10 of 17 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3. See what I'm talking about? It's like one night he shoots 5 of 9 from the field against a top 5 team in the West. The next night, he takes only 2 threes and doesn't make any of them. So, man, weird relationship he has with the three-point line, man. But Cam Johnson had 19, 11, and 3. His first double-double as a Denver Nugget. Congrats to Cam. There we go. That's exactly what we traded for him to do. 6 of 9 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3. Okay. Paolo Banchero had a triple-double for the Magic, 26, 16, and 10. Wendell Carter had 26, 8 rebounds and 2 blocks. Anthony Black had 22 points and 2 steals. Ultimately, this was a game where the Nuggets totally dominated. There's really no other way to say that, especially if you consider the fact that they didn't have Peyton Watson in this game at all. Peyton left the Rockets game after about 6 minutes total on Monday evening. No Peyton Watson at all against the Magic on Thursday evening, but they did have Julian Strawther back, kind of, right, for what that's worth, right? A guy who's missed several weeks, hasn't played in an NBA game significantly for a while, comes off the bench, gives you some minutes, okay? Not significant. Nuggets were down Gordon, Brown, and Watson, okay? 3 of their best players this season thus far. And they amassed a 21-point lead without those 3 guys against a team that's top 5 in the East. Okay, top 10 offensive and defensive team. That is what I would consider total dominance. When you do that with a thin team, that's an absolutely incredible win. All right. So Nuggets showed up this week, and they needed to. They continued the win streak. The win streak in total is now at 6 games. The road win streak is 10 or 11, I believe. One of those two. And so what continues again? The it is the winning. The winning just continues on for the Denver Nuggets. And it's just so impressive. Again, man, the fact that last year we were so concerned about the depth of this team and their ability to genuinely compete come playoff time is absolutely incredible when you look at this year's team. Because this year you have similar feelings, right? You're missing Gordon, Brown, Watson, and you're like, well, surely this team will be unable to keep up with their standards. Surely they won't be able to keep scoring 120 points per game without 3 of their best offensive and defensive players. Okay, the defense has obviously taken a hit, but the Nuggets continue to dominate offensively. Doesn't matter who you put in there. Jalen Pickett gets run. Zeke Naji gets run. All these guys who are coming off the 3rd string of the bench, they're getting run. They have to. We're down guys, and the Nuggets keep playing Denver Nuggets basketball well. That's an absolute testament to the effectiveness of David Adelman's coaching staff. And if you're able to put a Jalen Pickett in a position to succeed, not just by putting him in the game, right, with a generally better team around him, but in the offseason with your new coaching staff, working with him on things specifically, putting him in specific sets that optimize his ability. All of this stuff is what the coaching staff contributes to. And so whether it's a Jalen Pickett, whether it's a Spencer Jones, these are guys who started off the season as 3rd string guys. They're now having to step up and play more significant minutes, and they're doing absolutely amazing with it. Okay, Nuggets continue to hold it down. Top 2 seed in the Western Conference. I continue to persist that they're the largest threat in the league to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I continue to persist with my prediction that this team will win the championship this year if they stay healthy. They do need to be healthy in order to give themselves the best chance to knock off a top 5 offensive and defensive team in the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are also significantly younger, significantly more energetic than the Denver Nuggets are. So they do need their health for that. But ultimately speaking, if you can give your stars an opportunity to rest more, okay, to fully recover from their injuries, and assuming Jamal and Joker don't have to work significantly harder to keep this team afloat during those periods like the one we're in now, this is a team that can win it all and will win it all this year. I think they can knock off the Thunder in the postseason. They almost did it last postseason with a completely different team, a team that lacked the depth that this team has this year. And so there's a lot of optimism right now if you're a Denver Nuggets fan heading into the last few weeks of 2025 and then into early 2026. Okay, there's a lot of reasons to be excited if you're a Denver Nuggets fan. Okay, so ultimately, let's take a look at where the Nuggets are right now in the West. Okay, right now, Nuggets are still 2nd in the West. Like I said, they're still the best offensive team in the league. Actually, currently, by offensive rating, this is the best offense of all time. That's how well the Denver Nuggets have been playing offense to start the year, statistically. They're middle of the pack defensively. Again, this is a team that pushes closer to top 10 when they're healthy. They're down 2 of their best defenders, so this makes sense. They're bottom 10 in the league in 3-pointers attempted, or they're top 3 in the league in 3-point percentage. They're knocking their free throws down. Top 3 in the league in free throw percentage. Again, one of the largest changes from last year. The fact that this team is actually making those free throws. Last year, they were bottom 5 in the league in free throw percentage. This year, they're top 3. Another testament to the coaching staff. getting to work with guys who are on this team who struggled last year. Aaron Gordon might be a good example of a guy who's really worked on his shot, making his free throws more. Christian Brown also. And so that is another major contributor to this team's turnaround offensively, making more shots, getting more opportunities, and knocking in those free throws when they get the opportunity to get those 3 points. Nuggets are top 5 in the league in turnovers per game, meaning they don't turn the ball over very much, which is a good sign to see. And of course, they're on that 6-game winning streak, and it is an 11-game winning streak on the road that they're still maintaining. If they continue winning without key contributors, man, and as long as they can continue doing that, there is really no reason for us to believe that this team cannot go all the way this year. Again, especially considering the Eastern Conference. I know that teams like the Detroit Pistons are starting to show up with their younger guys now playing better, more chemistry between them. They're a threat, obviously. They're good, but I'm not terribly scared at this point in the season with the Nuggets potentially facing them in the NBA Finals. The largest threat the Nuggets have, obviously, is the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I'm just thinking about the Eastern Conference right now. There's really no one in the East that I'm genuinely scared of. Not really scared of the Knicks. Okay, not really scared of the Raptors. The Raptors are good this year. Not really scared of any of those other teams that you see towards the top of the East. All the scary teams are out West. Okay, you have the San Antonio Spurs. They're good. And here's, if you're thinking about this from a big picture perspective, right? Nuggets, let's assume they get the 2nd seed in the West. Okay, they're probably going to have to play a team that is actually pretty decently good. I think 6th seed in the West right now has 18 wins. 16 or 18 wins. Okay, that's really good. 7th seed too. Right? They're all generally in that win category. They're not far behind the 1 seed. That's just how good the Western Conference is. So let's say the Nuggets have to play a pretty good team first round. They get through that team in 5 or 6 games. Then the second round, you have to play probably one of the San Antonio Spurs, the Houston Rockets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, or the LA Lakers. The LA Lakers are actually pretty good this year too, believe it or not. LeBron hasn't played a ton, but Luka Doncic is absolutely carrying at an all-star level. Austin Reeves also has taken a major step forward for that team. They finally got themselves a decent center with DeAndre Ayton. They put together some other bench pieces, and lo and behold, JJ Redick's NBA intellect has this team that they've assembled competing for one of the top seeds in the Western Conference. So that's another team you have to worry about. If you have to play one of those 4 teams in the second round, that will be an absolute bloodbath. Okay, that's a 5 to 7 game series. So the Nuggets get through the first round in 5 or 6 games. They get through the second round in 5 or 7 games. Then you get the absolute pleasure of facing the Oklahoma City Thunder in the Western Conference Finals. That's also another 6 or 7 game series. And so this is going to be a very grinded out postseason for the Denver Nuggets. And so they have to be prepared for that. And they have to consider that when they're working on rotations this year, when they're trying to keep guys fresh for the postseason, which is really what this is all about. It's really cool to see the Nuggets have one of the best starts to a season in franchise history. Okay. I think they're 20-6, 21-6, something like that. Okay. That's incredible. But you don't want to commit so much of your energy and resources to dominating the regular season to the point where you get these guys gassed in the postseason and you're unable to close the deal in a very winnable year for your team. Okay. Ultimately, very excited about the prospects of this Denver Nuggets team this year. Upcoming week predictions. Let's talk about those. Nuggets have 4 games on the schedule over the next week or so. They have a few more after that. Like I said, this is the last episode of the year. So we'll have a few other games to talk about when we get back in the new year. But we're just going to talk about the next 4 games that the Nuggets have this upcoming week. Okay. First game is against Houston this afternoon, 3 p.m. Weird time, weird game scheduling. Okay. He played Houston earlier this week here in Denver. You're playing them 2 games later this week here again in Denver at a weird time on a Saturday afternoon. Weird scheduling stuff. Don't really know why that is. Maybe it's NBA Cup related. Ultimately, you have a chance to really just prove all the people, especially all the Houston fans who feel like their team kind of got screwed out of an opportunity to beat the Denver Nuggets on Monday evening. Okay. And again, according to NBA's last 2-minute review, those Houston fans are actually kind of right. Like we said earlier, 4 free throws, final 2 minutes of overtime. None of those should have happened. All those calls were wrong. Okay. If you're a Houston fan, you have a reason to be upset. But the Nuggets also have an opportunity to just put Houston and their fans out of their misery this afternoon and just come through with a clutch win, a solid statement win against Houston, and say, hey, that game on Monday was close, but we are the better team. We're going to actually take it to you today. All right. Houston's last 5 games, they lost at Dallas. They lost here, obviously, and they lost at New Orleans like Wednesday or Thursday evening. They've also won 2 games. They beat Phoenix. They beat the LA Clippers. Tari Eason is a game time decision based on the last time I checked. So his status for this game is TBD. But if he plays, he gives Houston a significant boost offensively and defensively. Okay. Obviously, the Nuggets beat Houston on Monday evening. I'm going to make a more specific prediction this week. I created this little spreadsheet, okay? Because I'm a nerd, and that's what nerds do. They create Excel spreadsheets, all right? Talk about it with your buddies. Laugh about it with them too. So the spreadsheet I created takes into consideration the last 5 games the team has played, the differences in points scored, points given up, and it also considers field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and turnovers as well. Okay. So based on this formula I put together, I'm trying to make more specific predictions. I want to see how close this formula is to accurately predicting games. Based on this formula, I think the Nuggets at best, based on their last 5 games and those statistics and Houston's last 5 games and statistics, I think they can beat Houston at best by about 15 points, specifically 116 to 101. Okay. That's at best. At worst, if you factor in the fact that these teams have played 2 games, they've both been really close, 3 points in each game. Nuggets have pulled it out, but barely. This could also be a very tight game. So I think at closest, the Nuggets could beat Houston 119 to 117. It's very similar to what the final score almost was on Monday in regulation. In regulation, had Hardaway not gotten fouled, Houston would have won 117 to 116. So there you go. That's for what that's worth, I suppose. Nuggets will beat Houston, though. That's my ultimate takeaway. I think they will come out and they will beat Houston this afternoon. Okay. Next game the Nuggets have is Monday evening at Utah. Okay. Utah has a very mid offense this year. They have the 2nd worst defense in the NBA this year. Their last 5 games look like this. They lost at the Knicks, they lost at home against Oklahoma City, and they lost at home against the Lakers. So they've played really good teams in their last 5 games, and they've lost all 3 of those games. All right. They did win 2 games. They beat Memphis at Memphis, and they beat Dallas at home. Okay. Neither of those teams are incredible this year. Lauri Markkanen is also to be determined, his status for that game on Monday evening. I know he's dealing with an injury. So all of that considered, I think the Nuggets go into Utah. They keep that road winning streak alive. And I think they beat Utah 122 to 109. Okay. Then the Nuggets play a back-to-back next evening. They go down to Dallas to play the Mavericks for the 2nd time this year. The Mavericks statistically are not incredibly good offensively. They actually have a pretty bad defense, but they have a top 10 defense, believe it or not, which is why they've been able to remain competitive in a lot of their games this year. They lost at Oklahoma City and at Utah, funny enough, in their last 5 games. But in their last 5 games, they beat Houston at home. Okay. They beat Brooklyn, not a great Brooklyn team, but they beat Detroit at home. Okay. So at home, they're undefeated in their last 5 games. Klay Thompson and Anthony Davis, their injuries are, I'm not sure how significant. They're also to be determined in terms of whether or not they're going to play. But I think ultimately, at best, Nuggets should go into Dallas and win by about 10, 118 to 108. That's my prediction. If you factor in the fact that Dallas did beat Denver by 10 here very recently, too, I might add, then it could be a lot closer of a game. But I do think the Nuggets will still pull it out, maybe by about 3, 121 to 118. Okay. But I'm predicting a win either way in that game. Last game of the upcoming week is Christmas evening. Hopefully you have a phenomenal Christmas season, and hopefully part of that phenomenal Christmas season is watching the Denver Nuggets play against the Minnesota Timberwolves here on Thursday evening. All right. The T-Wolves thus far this year, great defense and offense. Okay. They're a pretty complete team. At this point in the year, they have 18 wins, and despite having 18 wins, they're like the 6th or 7th seed in the West. Like I was saying earlier, tough conference. Okay. Minnesota's last 5 games are as such. They lost at home against Phoenix and at home against Memphis. So kind of strange there. They did win at home against the Clippers. They won at Golden State, and they won at home against Sacramento. So not terribly impressive. Factor in the fact that Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley are both on the injury report. Again, not sure how serious those injuries are. Maybe they might play on Thursday. Maybe they might not. Again, not totally sure. Either way, I don't think it'll matter, though. I think the Nuggets will take care of business against Minnesota on Christmas evening at home in a Rockin' Ball Arena on national TV. I think at best, at closest, this game will probably be about an 8-point game. So they'll probably beat the Timberwolves by about a score of 115 to 107. But if you take into consideration, again, those last 5 games for both teams, I think that the Denver Nuggets could beat the Timberwolves by upwards of 14 points, 127 to 113. Also factoring in the reality that the Nuggets have beaten the Timberwolves, was it twice this year? And both times at Minnesota. So now they're coming home. Nuggets have the home court advantage on Christmas evening. So that is our Nuggets segment. I see a few comments here. Oh, I saw Christian Brown dunking in practice. Do you have any info when he's coming back? Yeah, probably early January. Okay. I think January, sometime between the 2nd and the 9th is probably the timeline for Christian Brown's return. We'll see if that gets postponed a little bit. Again, you don't want him to be rushed back into play, especially considering how well Peyton Watson's been playing. Hopefully Peyton can come back to playing this week and doesn't have to sit out much longer with that contusion of some sort that he had, or maybe it was like a bone bruise. It was something really minor, is what they said. So if Peyton comes back, he's been really good in the 2-guard spot, and so I wouldn't rush Christian Brown back if I don't have to. Another comment says, do you have a prediction as to when Joker will pass Oscar Robertson in triple doubles? I think Joker has 177 and Oscar has 181. Yeah, Joker seems to like to get his triple doubles against good teams. So if he needs 5 games to pass Oscar Robertson, I'm going to guess that at safest, it's probably in the new year. But I mean, we have a few games to end the year here against pretty solid teams. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes on a nice little run and picks up those 5 at some point before the new year ends. But I think it's safest probably some point in January. That would be my prediction as to when he officially becomes 2nd all time in triple doubles for the Denver Nuggets, and just cementing himself as one of the greatest players and centers of all time. Okay. So again, we've talked about this before. Joker should probably end his career as a top 10 player of all time. If he were to be top 5 all time, it would mean that he has picked up at least a ring or 2 more than he currently has. Okay. You need the rings to be ranked higher than 5 to 10 all time. Okay, so the stats are important, obviously. So the triple doubles would definitely give him some clout in that regard by the time his career ends. But I think more importantly than the triple doubles for him being considered one of the greatest players of all time will be the rings. And he has 2 great opportunities this year and next year to pick up 2 rings, which would almost certainly cement his role as top 10, almost maybe top 5 all time. So we'll see how both of those play out throughout the course of this season and the next season. But it's time to switch into our Colorado Rockies segment of the discussion today. The offseason has been pretty slow for the Rockies, at least the last few weeks. Obviously, the new leadership team has been in the process of assembling itself. And that's been priority number 1. Why does it have to be priority number 1? Well, because you don't want to sign guys that are not guys that fit your vision. And in order to understand what your vision is, you have to have your leadership team assembled so they can set that vision from the top down. Okay. So if you're a Rockies fan out there, like many who are not terribly happy about the fact that the Rockies haven't made a major league free agent signing at this point in the offseason, even though they have a plethora of needs, consider a few things. Number one, free agent market is not terribly incredible for the guys that the Rockies are kind of looking at from a positional point of view and from an organizational point of view, given that there are some prospects coming up in some of those areas of need. But also, number two, the leadership team and the coaching staff have to be assembled before any of that really starts to become a priority for them. Once they understand their vision and they're in agreement on that, that impacts the guys that go out and sign, because those guys they go out and sign or trade for will impact their ability to carry out their vision for this franchise, not just this year, but for the long term. Okay. So with that said, the Rockies did finish up, presumably, filling out their front office. Okay. They hired another assistant general manager named Ian Levin, and they hired a bench coach, Jeff Pickler, over from the Cincinnati Reds. Levin comes from the Mets. Okay. He's another guy who has a lot of experience with very analytical approaches to baseball, which is something that is very commonplace in today's game. But again, the Rockies have not been on top of that over the last decade or so, maybe even longer. And so it's great to see that the new front office is bringing in assistants and coaches who are analytically minded from a coaching perspective, guys who are teacher oriented. These are guys who deal with individuals as they are. That's the track record that Jeff Pickler has at pretty much every stop of his professional coaching career. He has a track record of being a teacher of men at an individual level, working with guys based on their unique personality and skill set to get the most out of them that he can. And again, another thing you love to see is that these guys are young. Okay. I think Pickler's 49. I think Levin is in his mid to early 40s. So it's really cool to see this next generation of baseball minds at the executive and the coaching level come to this organization from outside the organization, bringing their diverse perspectives from their experience with an analytical orientation and with an emphasis on the individual. Okay. You can't treat guys as cookie cutter. You can't deal with players, especially young players, as if they're all generally the same. You have to work with them based on their unique skill sets, their unique areas for improvement. And you really have to do so in a data-oriented manner. And so that is an absolute plus for the Rockies, hiring an assistant GM and a bench coach who fit that mold for this team. But outside of front office and coaching, the Rockies have made a few minor league signings over the course of this offseason. They generally have. We're not going to talk about each and every single one of them. We talked about Nicky Lopez a few weeks ago, talked about John Brebbia a few weeks ago. They've signed a few other guys in there as well. But a notable minor league free agent signing that the Colorado Rockies made this week is to bring in Brent Sullivan. Brett Sullivan is a veteran catcher. He's been with the Padres. He's been with the Pirates. Okay. He hasn't played a ton of games over the course of his major league career. But at each stop he's been at, he has been a decent veteran catcher for the price tag. Okay. He's on a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. There's no guarantee he'll be on the 26-man roster to start the year. He'll probably start the year in AAA Albuquerque, but assuming he gives you enough with the bat and enough catching acumen behind the plate, what have we been saying on Hoops and Homers for the last few weeks when we're talking about the current situation the Rockies have, especially with catching? You need a veteran catcher, ideally a veteran catcher who can bat left-handed. Okay. Now, Braxton Fulford has incredible potential. Okay. We love Braxton Fulford here on Hoops and Homers. Any catcher who's in the 90s percentiles in sprint speed, who absolutely tears it up offensively at AAA at least, and shows decent potential offensively and defensively together, is a guy we're a fan of. Okay. Braxton fits that mold. The decision here for management is whether or not you want Braxton to get more of those opportunities on a day-to-day basis, or whether you're okay with him being Hunter Goodman's number 2 immediately. And a lot of that will depend on It'll really depend on how he comes out in spring training, right? If he gives you a reason, like a significant, unavoidable reason to make him your backup catcher to start 2026, then you have to go with Fulford. Okay, he's about at that point in his career. But if Brett Sullivan gives you enough offensively and defensively, given that he's a veteran, given that he bats left-handed and the Rockies need left-handed bats on this team, you could easily see Sullivan getting a 26-man roster spot and Fulford starting off the year as AAA Albuquerque's starting catcher, giving him daily reps so that if he does need to be called up for whatever reason, he's fresh and ready to go. Interesting decision that the Rockies have, but that's why that signing was so interesting to me this week. We've been talking about it for the last few weeks, saying that the Rockies do need left-handed bats. They need veteran catching experience. Brett Sullivan might not have the greatest balance of all of those things combined, but he generally fits that mold. And so you'll see what you can get out of him in spring training at that point. I see another comment here. Going back to Nuggets, it looks like T-Wolves just beat the Thunder last night. It'll be tough to beat on Christmas. Oof. Yeah, so I guess, that might throw a wrench in some things. I hadn't checked my phone this morning. Went to bed late last night, woke up a few hours before hopping on here. So if they beat the Thunder last night, I mean, that's good to see. I don't know how wide the margin of that game was from a score perspective. I don't know if there were players missing for the Thunder. Don't know what the situation is, but let's assume that everyone on the Thunder was healthy and the Timberwolves did win. That's pretty incredible. Okay, so they will be tough. They're always tough. They've been tough against us the last few seasons, and that's just not. It's not a team that you can take lightly. Okay, we'll put it that way. Yeah, Joker did pass Kareem in assist leader of all time. He did. That's true. Forgot to mention that. He did that against the Magic on Thursday evening. Yeah, so shout out to Joker for that. He's building that case, man. Top 10 all time. But anyway, as we go back to Rockies now, this is what I wanted to do last week, but we spent so much time talking about the organizational status of this team from a 40-man roster perspective. We walked line by line, player by player through the Colorado Rockies 40-man roster. And we talked about each player, kind of what we like about their build, what maybe there's to question about some of their builds. And so if you haven't seen that, I'd encourage you to go back and check out last week's show if you're interested in that. But this week, we're going to do a little comparison. We're going to compare the 2026 or 2025, I suppose, Colorado Rockies team to the 2018 Colorado Rockies team. Now, why would we do this? Well, the 2018 team was obviously the best team the Rockies have had in recent memory. So last time the Rockies went to the playoffs, last time the Rockies broke 90 wins. Okay. And I say 2026 because a lot of the guys who closed the year in 2025 will have an opportunity to compete for significant 2026 playing time, even though they didn't play a ton of games for the Rockies last year. If you're thinking about a guy like Blaine Krim, maybe a Ryan Ritter, a Kyle Karros, okay, that's kind of what I'm talking about here. But we're going to be looking at the 2025 results that the Rockies put up, and the 2018 results that the Colorado Rockies put up. And then we're going to look at each of these 26-man rosters and kind of establish what the differences are, how far the Rockies are away from being 2018 level competitive again, and hopefully what they need to do to be better than their 2018 team. Okay. So let's take a look here at the 2018 team's stats, just collectively as a team. All right. The team was 91-72. For those of you who might not remember, that does include an extra game because there was a game 163 that we played against the LA Dodgers for the division. Little known fact that many baseball fans probably forget. The Rockies were actually almost the first team in the NL West to knock off the Dodgers from their NL West crown. Came really close, kind of choked it that last series of the year in 2018 against the Nationals. They controlled their own destiny and they lost. So that was unfortunate. Anywho, 91-72. They lost in the NLDS, obviously, against the Milwaukee Brewers. Got swept 3-0. That season, in the regular season, the Rockies hit 210 home runs. So that was good for 8th most in the league. Okay, stole 95 bases. In today's day and age, with all the rule changes they've made and the changes to the bags, that doesn't seem like a lot. But actually in 2018, that was 8th most in the league. The Rockies were top 10 in home runs and stolen bases in all of Major League Baseball. In terms of runs scored, they scored 780, which was 7th best in the league. Batting average was 256, which was 6th best in the league, and their OPS was 757, which was 6th best in the league. So Rockies obviously have been known for being a good offensive team. That's what they were in 2018. But I think we forget how complete that team was. Top 10 offense, not just in terms of hitting, but also in terms of hitting for power, obviously, at Coors Field, and stealing bases. Okay, they could get some bases when they needed to in an era of MLB where the stolen base was not as big as it has once again kind of become. All right. In terms of strikeouts and walks, Rockies hitters struck out 1,397 times, which was 18th in the league. Okay. And they only walked 507 times. So this team was definitely known for its hitting. They didn't get on base as often as I'm sure they would have liked to with walks. And they definitely did strike out a lot. I do remember guys like Trevor Story struggling with that a lot. Okay. Big difference between the max of that guy's potential and the worst of his performance, right? I mean, 30 plus home run season, but you're going to strike out over 150 times in a season. It's like, that's just the trade-off you take when you get guys who hit for that kind of power. All right. In terms of pitching, the 2018 team was not terribly incredible. They were actually kind of mid. They did have 51 saves. Okay. Wade Davis contributed to most of those, obviously. And so that was good for 3rd most saves in the league in 2018. But in terms of strikeouts, they were 13th. In terms of home runs, they gave up 184. That was 16th. In terms of batting average against, they were 17th. Whip, 17th. Walks, 18th. Okay. And then ERA was 4.33 for the staff. So that was good for 20th in the league. So the Rockies won 90 games without a plus pitching staff. Okay. They had good guys in the bullpen. That was probably the highlight. Obviously, Kyle Freeland was 4th in Cy Young voting in 2018. You had a good season from German Marquez as the number 2 starter. And then you had 3 or 4 other guys in that rotation. We'll talk about them later. But ultimately, this pitching staff, outside of about 5 of the team's 13 or so arms, was not terribly incredible. And yet this team won over 90 games. Okay. Now you talk about the 2025 team. Obviously not going to be anywhere close to as good as the 2018 team, but we're going to do the comparison just so we can see what the difference is. All right. Just for fun. If that is something you would consider fun. 43 and 119. Okay. Worst record in the league. Only stole 87 bases. Now that's only 8 fewer stolen bases than the 2018 team. But again, the stolen base has begun to take off over the last few years. So 87 stolen bases landed the Rockies in 23rd in MLB, which is not great. Okay. Team had a team batting average of 237, 23rd in the league, only hit 160 home runs. Okay. That's 25th in the league. 679 OPS, 27th in the league. 597 runs scored, 29th in the league. Strikeouts, they were 29th in the league. And then in walks, they were 30th in the league. Okay. So it was definitely a bad year for the offense. And I think a lot of us kind of felt that when we were watching the team throughout the season. Just felt like they struck out a ton, didn't really get on base a ton. And when they did have opportunities to take advantage of, when guys did get on base, they weren't incredibly good at hitting with runners in scoring position for most of the season. Okay. They made significant progress in that regard as the season went along. In terms of pitching, the 2025 team, not good. This is one of the worst pitching staffs of all time, if not the worst pitching staff of all time in MLB. Okay. ERA was 5.97 across the staff. That's good for 30th, worst in the league. Saves, they were 28th. Home runs allowed, they were 30th. Walks, 23rd. Strikeouts, 30th. Batting average against, 296. Goodness gracious. The staff almost gave up a 300 batting average against collectively. Okay. That was 30th. Walks and hits per inning, 30th in the league. Okay. No surprises there. But if we look at the difference between 2018 and 2025, here are the direct differences. Okay. Batting average difference on offense between the 2018 and 2026 team was about 20 points, which is pretty significant. Okay. OPS, 80-point difference. obviously favoring the 2018 team. The 2018 team scored 183 more runs, hit 50 more home runs, stole 8 more bases, struck out 134 times less, and walked 112 times more. Okay, nothing surprising there. And then in terms of pitching, 2018 team had an ERA that was 1.64 earned runs lower. Batting average against, that was about 46 points lower. A whip that was about 27 points lower. They gave up 67 fewer home runs, had 22 more saves, struck out 316 more batters, and walked 47 fewer batters. Okay, so that's the direct statistical comparison. But now if we look at the 2018 team and bring back some fun memories, at least during the regular season and that wild card game, we can kind of see the builds that this team has. If you'll remember from last week's show, we discussed pitchers, obviously through a lens of their top 3 pitches. We discussed hitters through a combination of the pitch type they hit best, whether or not they hit the ball in the air or on the ground more, or if it's kind of balanced, and the best of the 5 tools that they have. Again, the 5 tools are hitting for average, hitting for power, speed, fielding, and arm strength. Okay, so let's take a look at this 2018 team, just again to bring back some fun memories. It's been a rough last few seasons if you're a Colorado Rockies fan. Okay, obviously. So let's just bring back the good vibes for a second here. Okay, behind the dish, Chris Iannetta. Now, he split time with Tony Wolters, obviously, but for the sake of breaking out the starting lineup and the bench, I put Tony on the bench and I put Chris in the starting lineup. I'm thinking about the postseason lineup mostly. If I'm not mistaken, Chris Iannetta did start 2 of the 3 games in the NLDS. Yeah, I could be mistaken about that, but I'm pretty sure he did. And that's why I put him in the starting spot here for the sake of comparison. He hit fastball best, he hit the ball in the air, and he hit for power. Now, if we take a look at Hunter Goodman, that's pretty similar, right? Hunter Goodman, 2025. He hit all pitch types pretty evenly, pretty well. He hit the ball in the air, and he hit for power. And so if we're doing a comparison between Iannetta and Goodman, obviously you want Goodman. Iannetta was at the back end of his career. Iannetta also was a veteran, though, so he could work better with the pitching staff for what that's worth. Ultimately speaking, though, if you're trying to get back to 2018 type competitiveness before being better than the 2018 team, you do like to see that your catching situation is on par with, if not better than, your catching situation in 2018. Okay, I'm actually going to give the edge to Hunter Goodman there. I think Hunter Goodman is better than Chris Iannetta at this point in Goodman's career and at that point in Iannetta's career. That's kind of the comparison we're going to do here. First base, interesting situation. Ian Desmond, right? First base. He was brought in on that massive contract to play a position he had never played before. Okay, that was the Jeff Bridich front office. Okay. Ian hit breaking balls the best of all the pitch types. He hit the ball on the ground mostly. And of the 5 tools, he's fast. Speed was probably his best of the 5 tools at that point in his career. The Rockies don't currently know who their starting first baseman is going to be in 2026, but in 2025 at the end, it was mostly Blaine Crim. Okay. And Blaine Crim hit the fastball best, hit the ball in the air, and hit for power. That is really the mold that you want out of your first baseman if you're the Colorado Rockies. And it's the reason why on last week's episode, I recommended that of the free agent first baseman available, they go out and get Nathaniel Lowe if they can. Lau, something like that. Because he fits that mold and he's a left-handed bat. Okay. And on top of that, won a World Series with the Rangers, been on competitive teams recently. I think he was on the Red Sox postseason roster at the end of last year. Nathaniel Lowe is the guy you want to go out and get. Okay. But if we're comparing the two, you're going to have to give the edge to Desmond just because Crim is unproven. He showed some potential at the end of last year, but he's also 28 years old. So his timeline is rather short. All things considered, I think Desmond probably gets the leg up there. So the 2018 team has the better first baseman. Now we get to the segment of the lineup and the 26-man roster where you're like, okay, 2018 team wins hands down. Okay. DJ LeMahieu, obviously better than Ryan Ritter. Okay. LeMahieu was a fastball hitter, hit the ball on the ground a lot, and was best known for fielding. Probably Gold Glove second baseman. Ryan Ritter hits all types of pitches on the ground. His best attribute is speed. Hands down goes to LeMahieu. That's not even a question. Okay. Same thing, obviously, at third base. There's this guy. Don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Nolan Arenado. Okay. Arguably one of the best third basemen of all time. Believe it or not, Nolan hit off speed the best of all the pitch types. Okay. Hit the ball in the air and hit for power. Kyle Karros is who I have slotted in at third base right now. Again, another position where the Rockies are thin. He's the only third baseman on the 40-man roster. He hits fastball best, hits the ball in the air, and his best tool, arguably at this point in his career, is his fielding at the major league level. So Nolan clears easily, obviously. Okay. Trevor Story versus Ezequiel Tovar. Tovar is going to be good. Okay. Tovar hits all types of pitches, hits the ball in the air. His best tool is probably his fielding also, but he gets a lot of extra base hits, especially those doubles. And so he'll have a solid role in the lineup going forward. That's just not better than Trevor Story, though. Hit the off-speed pitches best, hit the ball in the air, and hit for power. Okay. Speed was another attribute that Trevor had. So Trevor was probably the closest thing to the 5-tool player that the Rockies have had over the last few seasons, right, when he was here, obviously. Okay. So Trevor clears Tovar. Left field, David Dahl. Baby David Dahl. Remember him? Remember how we thought he was going to be an incredible outfielder for years to come. 2018 gave us hope that didn't really last. But in 2018, David Dahl hit fastballs best, hit the ball in the air, and he was fast. His speed was probably his best attribute, believe it or not. Jordan Beck is actually pretty comparable. Obviously, he bats from the right side, hits fastball best, hits the ball in the air, and hits for speed. And so if you're really comparing these two, they're actually a lot closer than you might think. Okay. Beck actually had a 0.9 WAR in 2025. David Dahl had a 0.8 WAR in 2018, rather. Sorry. Obviously, David Dahl played a lot fewer games in 2018, and so that's a lot more impressive for that reason. But between Beck and Dahl, they're actually a lot more comparable than you might have thought at face value, at least if you're comparing the 2025 Beck and 2018 Dahl. So for that reason, I'm going to give Dahl here the advantage. I think given that he played a lot fewer games, that's really the only reason why he had such a comparable WAR to a Jordan Beck. Center field. Oh yeah. Who's that guy manning center field for over a decade for the Colorado Rockies? Charlie Blackmon. Yeah. Charlie clears Doyle. Doyle, again, we've been so high on Doyle on this show. I think Doyle has 5-tool potential for this team. He arguably has 4 of the tools at the major league level proven right now when he's on. Okay. But Charlie is proven. Okay. Charlie has an over 20 career WAR in a Colorado Rockies uniform, batting champ multiple times. Okay. So Charlie hit the fastball best, hit the ball in the air, hit for power. Doyle hits all pitch types, hits the ball in the air, but his best tool right now is probably his defense. Okay. So his arm and his fielding on top of his speed. Okay. Those are the most proven attributes. Charlie obviously clears Doyle. In right field was Carlos Gonzalez. Amazing career with the team, obviously. But in 2018, he kind of took a few steps back, hit the fastball best, hit kind of balanced, actually. He hit ground balls and fly balls almost at the same rate. And his best tool was his arm strength. Okay. In right field for the Rockies, I've plugged Tyler Freeman in there right now. Could be Mickey Moniak, but again, Tyler has the better arm. I think he's faster than Mickey too. So I plugged Tyler in there for the comparison. Tyler hits fastballs best, hits the ball on the ground most of the time, and his best tool is speed. So Cargo probably clears Freeman at this point in time. Okay, 2018 Cargo. It does have the leg up here in this comparison. But if you take a look at these benches, this is where it kind of gets interesting because I didn't realize this in 2018 when I was watching this team very closely. If you take a look at the Rockies 2018 bench, there's such a diverse number of attributes and abilities that this team had constructed. It's really quite amazing. Look at the diversity and how really none of these guys has the exact same tools as any of the other guys on this bench. Okay. You had baby Ryan McMahon. Okay. Third base. batted left-handed. He hit off speed best that year, hit the ball in the air, and his best tool was fielding. You had Gerardo Parra, left fielder, okay? Also batted left-handed. Hit breaking balls the best. Hit pretty balanced, ground balls and fly balls. And he hit for average. That was his best tool, okay? Take a look at Tony Walters, backup catcher, also hit left-handed. Hit fastball the best. He hit the ball on the ground most of the time, and his best tool was probably his arm, at least with the pop time, right? Take a look at the righties now off the bench. Garrett Hampson, baby Garrett Hampson, second base. Okay, at this point in his career, batted right-handed, hit fastball best, hit balanced, fly balls, ground balls, and his best tool was speed. Okay, then you look at Matt Holliday, right field, right-handed batter. It was cool that they brought him back for the stretch run there in 2018. He hit off-speed best, hit the ball in the air, and hit for power. So you just see the diversity there that the Rockies had on that bench. And that must have been an absolute manager's dream for Bud Black. Obviously, it's not the most incredible bench in the world, okay? But from a tools perspective, it helps them win games because in games, you could pinch hit for certain guys and get a different skill set based on the point in the game that you needed that skill set. And they had everything. They had guys who hit for average. They had fast guys who hit for power, air, ground, balanced, off-speed, fastball, breaking pitches. They had everything covered on their bench. Okay. That's a good bench. That's what you want out of a bench. You want a bench that has balanced handedness in batters and a balanced skill set, and also a balance between young guys and veterans. Okay. You had baby Hampson, baby McMahon. And you also had veteran Holiday and veteran Parra. That's a good bench. So the Rockies had a phenomenally constructed bench in 2018 from that perspective. The Rockies bench in 2025 needs some work. Okay. It's not that the guys aren't talented, but it's that you don't have that balance that you see that the 2018 team had. Okay. I've thrown Troy Johnston in here because, again, this is like a 2025, 2026 hybrid comparison. I'm bringing back the guys who are still on the team from 2025 and kind of mixing in some of the guys who are already signed this offseason for 2026. So the bench right now I have Mickey Moniak, Troy Johnston, Sterling Thompson, believe it or not. Maybe we can talk about that another time. Yanquiel Fernandez and Braxton Fulford at this point in time. Okay, those are all guys on the 40-man roster. Obviously, that's 4 lefties and 1 righty. The general theme here is that most of these guys hit the fastball best. Most of them hit the ball in the air. And most of them have the best tool in their toolkit as speed. Okay, so that's not the most diverse bench that you probably want to have. If you're the Colorado Rockies, you're going to have to do something about that. Because again, everyone I listed for the 2026 26-man roster is right-handed. Okay, that's not going to fly. Obviously, you have the DH spot that you're going to use. And so you can throw a lefty into the DH spot if you need him. I obviously recommended earlier in the offseason platooning Freeman and Moniak because they're very similar and that they're better offensive players than they are defensive players. But it'll be very interesting to see what lefties make this team. And I think Mickey Moniak obviously will be on this team. I think of the lefties, Johnston, Thompson, and Fernandez all have a great opportunity to start the year on this team. So obviously the Rockies bench needs some work, as does the starting lineup in certain areas, but it's cool to see what the 2018 team had and how the Rockies need to shift their bench going forward. They're obviously lacking in veterans, and they need guys who can hit off speed and who can hit for average on that bench as well. That's what you're kind of looking for in a veteran bench bat that the Rockies need right now. And a guy who bats left-handed. Okay. Now let's take a look at the pitching staff. This is the last aspect of this comparison that we're going to touch on. Very, very interesting here. Okay. There's a lot you could talk about here. And we've talked about it for a little bit on previous episodes. Just the type of pitch builds that you're looking for at altitude, given the differences between altitude and sea level, and the fact that the team has to play back and forth throughout the course of a 162 game season. That said, in 2018, the Colorado Rockies rotation generally looked like this. Okay, you had Kyle Freeland as your ace. You had German Marquez as the solid number 2. Then you had Senzatella, John Gray, and Tyler Anderson rounding out that group. Of these 5, all of them threw a 4-seam fastball. That was their most used pitch. None of them really threw it very well, actually. I think all of them gave up significantly high batting averages against on their fastballs. But the thing that they all had in common is that their 4-seam fastballs were all pretty low spin rate. Okay. Which, as we've talked about on this podcast or the show before, is very helpful for Colorado pitchers. Okay. Less variability between altitude and away from altitude. You're relying less on that ride or that fade. If you're thinking of a high spin rate changeup. Okay. You want lower spin rate for that greater consistency. And that's something that the starting rotation in 2018 had. Okay. If you look at the secondary pitches, you see cutters, sliders, and curveballs, along with changeups for Freeland and Anderson. They didn't throw those pitches as much as they probably should have, considering that the changeup is one of the best pitches to throw at altitude. But if you're looking at these secondaries, cutters, sliders, great secondary pitches to have. Lower spin rate in that category too, although sliders are less impacted by altitude, so you can get away with a higher spin rate slider. Freeland did not have a high spin rate slider in 2018. They actually changed it to a cutter. They on Baseball Savant, they reclassified his slider as a cutter for whatever reason. But that was a pitch he got good success with. Senzatella and John Gray both threw that slider as a secondary pitch. And then German Marquez kind of got away with that curveball as his secondary pitch, his most used secondary pitch. It was a high spin rate pitch. High spin rate curveball is not generally something you want at altitude based on our digging here. And you'll actually notice if you look at his 2018 splits, he was almost 2 times better on the road than he was at home. Okay, so German Marquez didn't really fit that pitcher mold the best. I actually think in the not the wild card, but the NLDS game he started in 2018 against the Brewers, he gave up a home run to Jesus Aguilar that gave the Brewers the lead or expanded their lead, one of the two. And that was a curveball. He threw a curveball, it was hung, and Aguilar crushed it. And so German didn't fit the ideal pitcher mold in that sense, but he was still able to get away with it for most of the year, had a sub-4 ERA, so it worked for him enough. Then you look again, Senzatella and John Gray both threw curveballs as their 3rd most used pitch. Those were lower spin rate pitches, and so they were kind of able to get away with that. I don't remember their specific batting averages against on those pitches, but all in all, that was the construction of the rotation in 2018. You had guys who threw low spin rate 4-seam fastballs that didn't really give them much success, but their secondary pitches did. And the pitchers who had the best secondary pitches consistently between Coors Field and away from Coors Field were the guys who threw sliders and cutters. Okay. Those are plus secondary pitches to have as a Colorado Rockies pitcher. You see some curveballs in here as well, like we just talked about, but not optimal to have that as your secondary pitch as a Colorado Rockies pitcher, although like German Marquez, you can get away with it. The 2025-2026 rotation is going to be very interesting, okay? Because you have some similarities, but a few differences, okay? Maybe even more similarities, though, which is a good thing to see. Right now, for the 2026 rotation, based on the guys we have currently on the 40-man roster, I have Kyle Freeland, Tanner Gordon, Chase Dollander, Ryan Feltner, and Gabriel Hughes. Okay, again, Hughes is kind of like Thompson. Both guys added to the 40-man roster this offseason, and I think they have a good chance to make the team out of spring if they have solid springs. So just like I threw Thompson in there on the bench, I threw Gabriel Hughes in the starting lineup or the starting rotation. Let's talk about these pitch mixes, though. All of them throw 4-seam the most. Okay. Ideally, you want sinker ball fastball pitchers at Coors Field. Okay. It's a low spin rate pitch, and its spin direction is less impacted by altitude because it's less reliant on that fighting against gravity type of movement that a 4-seam fastball has. Okay. But 4-seam fastball is fine, like we saw in 2018. Freeland throws it's weird, the evolution of Kyle Freeland's four-seam fastball. He's actually picked up about 200 RPMs over the last few years of his career. And so he threw the fastball most in 2018, still throws it the most of all the pitches in his repertoire in 2025, but the pitch build is a little bit different. And for that reason, it's kind of interesting to say whether or not that's been a good thing, because his fastball was, I think actually his fastball was pretty good in 2018. It wasn't incredible, but it wasn't terrible. Ultimately speaking, that's his situation, Kyle Freeland's situation. Tanner Gordon has a low spin rate four-seam fastball. Feltner has a lower spin four-seam fastball. Not sure about Hughes. I know Dollander throws a pretty high spin four-seam fastball. Okay, something he's going to have to work on controlling. Again, it's no mystery that he had an ERA that was almost, if not over, 3 times higher at Coors Field than on the road. These high spin rate fastballs and curveballs aren't going to be good for that consistency between the two. Okay, I bet that's one of the reasons. But hopefully he can work on that. Tanner Gordon, I think, has a good upside in terms of the fact that he has the most ideal pitch mix of everyone in this rotation. He and Feltner, but Gordon had a pretty solid year in 2025. Feltner didn't have that season go the way he wanted him to, or wanted it to. But Gordon, if we just look at him for a second, he's got a four-seam fastball, a slider, and a changeup, all 3 of which are pretty low spin. And so I think he's got the best opportunity to be the most consistent of the Colorado Rockies starters in 2026. So that's why I'm super excited about what he has to show in spring and throughout the course of the year. He'll undoubtedly get opportunities if he's healthy. But you see Dollander, again, a very high upside pitcher, man. He's got tons of potential. He flashed it at times last year. His curveball is great, but it's very high spin rate. And so it'll be very interesting to see how he can sort of balance that transition between Coors and away from Coors. Obviously, he's talked with guys like Scott Oberg about how to manage that. We'll see how productive those conversations and his prep this offseason have been in 2026. Throws a cutter as his 3rd most used pitch, though. It's like a cutter slider thing. So that's all right. Solid pitch to have there in that regard. Feltner, again, we kind of talked about his four-seam. He has a changeup and he has a slider as his next 2 most used pitches. I think he really honestly just needs to stay healthy. And if he can get more control, then I think he'll be in a position to be one of the best pitchers on the team in 2026. He could have been that in 2025, had some injuries, had some setbacks, got stuck in AAA. That's a whole story. But I think he has an opportunity to be like a Tanner Gordon and to be one of the more consistent guys in this rotation, just based on his pitch mixes and their builds. Gabriel Hughes, yet to be proven, obviously, hasn't pitched at the major league level yet. He'll probably make his debut in 2026. He throws a curveball and a slider behind his four-seam. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Kind of similar to a German Marquez 2018 build. Like we kind of talked about, didn't work incredibly well for German, but it worked well enough. And so we'll see how Hughes can balance that. There was a whole article on MLB.com about the fact that Hughes has been digging into how to pitch better in the altitude environment. And so it seems like he's getting ahead of the game in terms of preparation about how to manage that. So something to keep our eyes on as we watch his performance in 2026. I briefly talked about Kyle. He's the only holdover from 2018, which is kind of weird. But his knuckle curve is his second most used pitch now. It used to be the cutter. Now it's his knuckle curve. His knuckle curve is actually a really good pitch, believe it or not. And again, he doesn't have that sort of closer to 11. Well, I guess he's left-handed, right? So yeah, it would be 11. He doesn't really have a close to 11-4, 12, 11-5, 12-4 spin on his curveball because of his arm slot, which gives him more success and consistency between Coors Field and away from Coors Field. But we'll see how that continues to play out. It was a really good pitch for him in 2025. Obviously, it's different from the pitch type he threw second most in 2018, but we'll see if he can continue to improve. He improved steadily throughout the course of the year last year. We'll see if that transitions into 2026. Okay, lastly, we're going to talk about the bullpen. Now, the bullpen is the 2025-2026 Colorado Rockies' largest strength. Okay, I think that's been acknowledged by a few people now, especially us here on Hoops and Homers. A lot to like about this bullpen. If we take a quick look at the 2026 bullpen first, there's a lot to like. Okay, you got RJ Pettit, you got Antonio Senzatella, Brennan Bernardino, Seth Halverson, Jaden Hill, Juan Mejia, Jimmy Herget, and Victor Vodnik. Okay, the commonalities here: four seams that are low spin rate, sinkers that are lower spin rate, and sliders. A lot of sliders here. If not sliders, then slurvy curveballs. Okay, we'll touch on that in a second. But let's start with Pettit. Pettit has a good build. I'm not sure about the specific spin builds and pitch builds on his particular pitches. He throws a slider most of the time, four seam and then sinker. Not sure what that looks like, but it's a good pitch mix at a bare minimum. So we'll be excited for that. Antonio Senzatella, it'll be interesting, man. It'll be interesting to see if he makes this team. Obviously, he's under contract, but he was not good in 2025. Four-seam slider curveball is the exact same build and the exact same pitch usage that he had in 2018. So he hasn't really changed that. His fastball has picked up 200 RPMs, very similar to Kyle Freeland. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why he struggled since returning from the injury that he had a year or so ago. So it'll be interesting to see how he makes an attempt to improve in his new role out of the bullpen as a long reliever, but that's something to note. Brennan Bernardino, we've talked about this at length before, so I won't touch on it for terribly long today. Sinker, curveball, changeup. Sinker, low spin rate pitch, solid build, solid pitch. Talked about that already today. Curveball is technically a curveball, but it's more slurvy. So it's less impacted by the altitude because of its spin direction, and he throws a changeup. Lot to like about that decision to trade for Brennan Bernardino. Solid fit for this bullpen. Veteran reliever and a guy who has a good chance at succeeding and being consistent between altitude and away from altitude. Seth Halverson, four-seam splitter slider. Love the mix. Love the fact that you have a guy who can throw 101 out of your bullpen and then drop a 90-mile-an-hour splitter as a 10-mile-an-hour difference for hitters. Okay, splitters are another good pitch to have at altitude. Low spin rate pitch, similar to a changeup, can get more fade in certain circumstances if you throw it with a particular spin direction. You like the potential that Halverson has out of this bullpen. Although the Rockies do need another lefty in that bullpen, probably. So I think of the relievers on this team, his position is most likely to be up for grabs. Jaden Hill, sinker, changeup, slider. Perfect pitch mix. His sinker is a little bit higher spin rate than you'd like, but ultimately he pitched well in 2025. No reason to think he can't continue that in 2026. There's a lot to like about Jaden Hill as a short inning reliever in like 6th, 7th inning situations. So a lot of upside there. Juan Mejia, four-seam slider. Okay, high spin rate slider. Higher spin rate four-seam than you might like. But again, pretty solid rookie year for him. We'll see if that continues in 2026. Still think he needs to add a changeup just to balance out that arsenal. But we'll see how that goes. Jimmy Herget, very similar to Brennan Bernardino, but from the right side. Throws a curveball, but it's more of a slurvy curveball based on the spin and his arm angle. Same thing with the slider. Same thing with the sinker. Okay. Solid pitch builds, even though he has a really high spin rate breaking pitches based on the type of spin he gets. It gives him a good opportunity to build that consistency between home and away. Then you have Victor Vodnik, four-seam changeup and slider. Okay. Great build. He has a lot of upside to be the closer on this team. I think he'll probably have to earn the closer role again. He was a good closer in Halverson's absence last year. So I think personally, I'd like him to remain as the closer. Seems pretty comfortable in that role. And he has the pitch mix and pitch build to be a solid reliever again in 2026. In 2025, he had a sub-3 ERA. So a lot to like there about the supervillain, as he's called now, I suppose. This is what the Rockies bullpen looked like in 2018. He had Chad Bettis in long relief. He had Chris Russin, Harrison Musgrave, DJ Johnson, Sung Wong Oh, remember him? Scott Oberg, Adam Ottavino, and then Wade Davis, of course. Bettis and Russin were softer throwing, long relievers. Okay. But they threw solid mixes. Okay. Bettis had low spin, four seam, changeup, cutter. Russin had a low spin sinker, cutter, changeup. So that's the build you wanted. And that was good to see from a pitch build perspective. Obviously, neither of them were incredibly great pitchers in 2018, but they were good enough and they had successful pitch mixes and pitch builds. Okay. Harrison Musgrave threw a sinker, slider, and four seam. Harrison had higher spin rates on his pitches, but he had enough of a deceptive arm angle to be able to get away with it, I think. Okay, he was pretty good for the Rockies in 2018 in the limited action that he got. Made the postseason roster and pitched pretty well in the postseason. So that was Harrison Musgrave. DJ Johnson, another guy who was short-lived. Four seam, curveball, cutter. I think he had higher spin rates on those pitches too, which is probably why he didn't last terribly long. But he also, for the short stint that he got in 2018, was solid enough out of that bullpen to give them consistency. Sung Wong Oh, I think actually fit the pitch mix pretty well, and the pitch builds pretty well that the Rockies were looking for. Four seam, cutter, changeup, all of which were lower spin, I believe. So not a surprise that he was all right. He was worse with the Rockies than he was with the team he was with earlier in the year. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was the Cardinals or the Blue Jays, something like that. But ultimately, solid pitch mix. Scott Oberg, the best of all of the relievers was Scott Oberg from a total perspective. You might argue that Adam Ottavino was better statistically, but from a pitch build and pitch mix perspective, Oberg was the pinnacle. Okay. Four seam, slider, changeup, all of which were low spin rate. He had solid ERA in 2018, and he was better at home than he was on the road in a very similar number of innings pitched in both. That's what you want out of a Colorado Rockies reliever. So you love to see that out of Oberg. Adam Ottavino threw a sweeper, sinker, and cutter, all of which were a little bit higher spin rate than you would have liked, probably from a consistency perspective. Also had a funky motion, which made it difficult from a technical perspective for him to be consistent. But ultimately, he was really good in 2018. And so you can't complain about that if you were the 2018 Colorado Rockies. Wade Davis, though. Wade Davis threw a four-seam, cutter, and curveball, all of which were high spin rate. And there's a reason why Wade Davis did not have a long or successful tenure in Colorado. Okay. Colorado, I think, was the last team he pitched for consistently before he retired. Okay. He had a much better ERA on the road than he did at home. Why? Do we again attribute that mostly to pitch mix and pitch build? Probably. Okay. That's just the way the altitude works. And Wade Davis found that out firsthand. I was incredibly surprised when he decided to sign with us in the offseason of 2018. I was like, wow, this quality of a reliever is coming here. Incredible. Super excited about that. Well, he was top of the league in saves. He had a +4 ERA, and it was an interesting situation, needless to say, with Wade Davis. All things considered, though, I think the Rockies bullpen in 2025-26 has a chance to be better than the 2018 bullpen. And the 2018 bullpen was pretty good. And this Colorado Rockies team needs that bullpen to be solid as they figure out the starting pitching, as they hopefully go out and bring in a guy or two from outside the organization, whether it be via free agency or via trade. If the rotation is not going to be consistent for a while as some of the younger guys get comfortable at the major league level, you need this bullpen to be locked down. And I think they have that potential. It'll be interesting to see how that goes in 2026. I'm very excited to see how that all plays out over the course of the year. So that's all I had on the agenda today, guys. Thank you for watching this show. Hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. Seems like we got some comments today. So thank you to everyone who reached out with your perspective. It is much, much appreciated. And we will absolutely talk about all of your questions, comments, whatever you might have, if you drop them in the comments section. So we look very forward to much more of that in the new year. But other than that, this is the last show for the rest of 2025. Thank you for an amazing first 4 or 5, maybe 6 shows of Hoops and Homers. We look forward to keeping that going in 2026. Till then, have a fantastic holiday season. Continue enjoying watching the Nuggets dominate and continue building up excitement for the Colorado Rockies as they continue to rebuild their organization into a potentially competitive organization within the next 4 or so years. Yeah, you heard it here first. All right. Till then, take care. Have a fantastic rest of your Saturday and peace out.